All right, everybody. This is activity 3. We're looking at card 1. Card 1, you are going to read and follow along about the description of Mrs. Pratchett in Mr. Coombs in that chapter. So, read very carefully. It's not too long. It's going to take 2 minutes to read everything. But as you're listening, you want to highlight Mrs. Pratchett's dialogue. Dialogue is what Mrs. Pratchett says. On card 2, you want to make sure that as you reread what you highlighted, you are paying attention to words that Mrs. Pratchett uses. How is she describing, or sorry, how would you describe her to someone based on what she says and anything you can understand from what she says? Explain your answer using one or two pieces of her dialogue as evidence. So you could write something like, I think Mrs. Pratchett is, and then describe her, because, and then you use your evidence. And remember, when you're using your evidence, you use the correct quotation, comma, punctuation, combination, however you're inserting that evidence into your sentence. You want to do it based on how we practiced it in earlier lessons. On card 3, we are going to look at not only dialogue, but narration as well. So in a separate color, it's different than the dialogue color you picked, you're going to highlight Mrs. Pratchett's actions. When the story describes her actions, that's a narration of what she does. So anything that she does that is not her speaking is what you're going to highlight. Then you're going to answer the question, did what you highlighted support your idea of who Miss Pratchett is? So is it the same thing that you thought about her, or is it something new? And then on card 4, you want to consider the words that Roald Dahl used to describe her. He used very specific and intentional language to tell you about Mrs. Pratchett. Remember, this is his memoir. So what did he say so that you, the reader, understood a specific idea of who Mrs. Pratchett was? What do those details show you about Dahl's point of view, his opinion about Mrs. Pratchett? So you're going to use the evidence and write a sentence something like, Dahl uses words like, and then you fill it in and give 2 or 3, 4 examples. And from those words, I believe that Dahl thinks Mrs. Pratchett is blank because. So make sure you write that correctly. You don't have to use exactly what I wrote, but there's a good sentence starter to make sure that you have written a quality response.